You said yesterday that once somebody recognizes his true nature, the fear of death disappears. And I feel, although I have recognized, and I'm very happy and peaceful, and I hardly feel any separation still.
That the fear of death disappears simply because one recognizes that one's being is ever present.
I do understand that when I'm in that.
Well, keep going back to that then. Whenever you feel the fear of death, trace your way back to your being. Mm-hmm. That is the resolution of your fear of death.
And eventually it'll just fade away?
Yes, the less you entertain the fear of death, and the more you go back and abide in your being, the less the fear of death will visit you. So it still just gradually cease appearing.
So you think it could be a habit just because of my history, just another habit?
Yes, yeah, not just because of your personal history, but also because of your conditioning, irrespective of your personal history, your conditioning in our world culture. Yeah. It's a conditioning that's deeper than just your personal history. I understand your personal history. There may have been an added layer of conditioning that gave you this fear. But in either case, it's conditioning. And don't touch the conditioning. Don't try to do anything to it. It'll leave you like a headache leaves you. Mm-hmm. In other words, without your noticing it, just go back to your being and know and feel its ever-presentness. That is the cure for the fear of death.
I've been all my life consider myself an atheist and completely into the material world and thinking about annihilation, about death, and I was kind of terrified. And then at the end of July, something happened. I lost my little dog, and I never lost anybody close to me before that. So I found her there, and I said, "This is not my dog." There was a body with the eyes open and the tongue out, and I cried and cried and cried. Spent a week in my room. Then I started to investigate, and I went from thing to thing, from Einstein somehow to non-duality, and I found you on the internet, and you really made a difference in me. And all these teachings make a lot of sense. I don't need to go into anything magic to understand them. But because of many years of a materialistic approach to life, I always have a voice in me that says this is a trick of the brain, the damn brain, to diverge the attention of annihilation after that. In other words, a trick. Also because when we die, we won't have the experience that we have right now. So I don't understand how we will, what the difference between dying and not having an experience. How is that different from annihilation?
Do you feel that when you fall asleep at night, you are annihilated?
No, but my brain is still there.
If you did, you would be terrified of sleep. Are you terrified of sleep, or do you look forward to sleep?
Look forward.
Why do you look forward to sleep?
To rest.
More specifically?
There's a sense of...
What does that rest consist of?
There's a sense of, I don't know, warmth and pleasure.
Okay. But when you fall asleep at night, everything is taken away from you. First of all, the world is taken away from you when you close your eyes. Then in time your bodily sensations are taken away from you. Your thoughts and feelings are taken away from you. All you're left with is images. That's what we call the dream state. And finally your images are taken away from you. Everything is taken away from you except yourself. That's what you call rest. That's what you call warmth. You look forward to it. If, when everything was taken away from you, you also were taken away, that would be annihilation, and we would be terrified of it. But we are not terrified of going to sleep. On the contrary, we look forward to going to sleep precisely because we look forward to being all alone. It's such a relief to be all alone with ourselves. That is the peace of deep sleep. Now, what is to suggest? The period that we go through every 24 hours. Remember, if our minds are precipitated within consciousness, if each of our minds is like a little mini consciousness, then our minds must be a microcosm of consciousness, and they must behave the same way that consciousness behaves. Therefore, could it be that the cycle that a finite mind goes through every 24 hours is a mini version of the cycle that consciousness goes through every lifetime? In other words, that falling asleep at night is like a little dress rehearsal for death. That when we die, first of all, the world is taken away from us. We're lying on our deathbed with our eyes closed. We're too weak even to open our eyes. Then we lose our sensations. Then we lose our thoughts and feelings. And then we remain with images, what they call in the Tibetan tradition a bardo realm. It's not a realm that we visit. It's just the images that are left, similar to the images that are left in the dream state, when our perceptions, sensations, thoughts and feelings have been removed from us. And then when those images are taken away, we remain all alone as we are, pure consciousness. And then, if there are seeds that are still left over from the images, a new image may appear, and just as it does in the morning, we go into deep sleep, and then we go through another phase of dreaming. In other words, images having been taken away from us the night before, we then have a period of deep sleep. The images are added back to us. They're not added back, they arise from within us again. That's the dream after a period of deep sleep. Then thoughts and feelings, sensations, and finally perceptions appear, and there we are the next morning. Why couldn't that be a little dress rehearsal for a life, one life after another?
Well, because the brain is still there, and it's still working. When I die, the brain will be gone.
The brain is what the activity of consciousness looks like when viewed from a second-person perspective. Just like an object is what the activity of consciousness looks like from a second-person perspective. Tell that to the next neuroscientist you see. That is why, incidentally, that is why none of us have a first-person experience of having a brain. Has anyone here ever actually experienced their brain? No. The brain is always a second-person point of view. Our brain is what our first-person, you take the taste of chocolate. Our first-person perspective is the taste of chocolate. A second-person point of view of that taste of chocolate will be a reading on a graph. So the reading on the graph is a second-person point of view of our first-person experience. So a brain scan is what our first-person point of view, the taste of chocolate, looks like when viewed from a separate subject of experience. Why not? This explains our experience, the fact that when you open a head you see a brain. It explains our experience without recourse to something outside our experience, namely matter. It explains our experience only using the elements of experience that we actually experience, namely mind. So it has this consciousness-only model has exactly the same explanatory power as the materialist model has, but it can also explain very much more than the materialist model, which has to exclude from its model experiences such as synchronicity, intuition, love, happiness, all these experiences simply cannot be explained under the materialist model. So the consciousness-only model can not only explain everything that the materialist model explains, it can explain very much more. And it can do so without recourse to this imaginary substance outside consciousness called matter, which nobody has ever or could ever find. The separate self is just a collection of thoughts and feelings. That's it. There's nothing there to the separate self apart from thoughts and feelings. And how long do thoughts and feelings last? Seconds, yes. In fact, the reason when we desire something, when we desire an object or a situation or a relationship, we're not really desiring the object, the situation or the relationship. What we're really longing for is for the state of desire, which is a state of agitation, to come to an end. That's what all desire seeks, is desirelessness. All thought seeks the end of thought. The end of thought is called understanding. Even scientific knowledge, scientists who explore thought, philosophers that explore thought, what are they looking for? They're looking for understanding. Understanding is the end of thought. For understanding to take place, thought must come to an end. What is it that all feeling is seeking? Love. For love to be present, feeling has to come to an end. Every time a thought or a feeling comes to an end, the separate self dies. If a thought comes to an end, we call it understanding. If a feeling comes to an end, we call it love. If a perception comes to an end, we call it beauty. All these experiences, are you afraid of understanding love and beauty? No, it's what the separate self longs for. If you were to do a survey now of all 7 billion apparently separate selves and ask them what do they want, they would all say love, peace, happiness, or beauty. In other words, what they're really saying without realizing it is, I am longing to come to the end of being a separate self. That's all the separate self ever wants, is to come to the end of the pain of separation. Why fear that? It's all you ever long for. When you're longing for anything, when you're desiring anything, you are desiring to die as a separate self. Don't wait till your body dies for that to take place. You can do that. That death can take place whenever you want.
And it's actually not fear, it's sadness.
But why are you sad? What are you going to lose of value?
One wants to believe, or the me wants to believe that this life will go on forever. That's what one would.
But you see, the presumption in your question is that there is a forever, that there is time that goes on. In other words, the presumption in your question is that there is something called time, a line of time that started, of course, we can't ask when it starts because that in itself, but the presumption is that it starts somewhere back in the distant past, and that the line of time is going to go on. Let's hope it goes on forever. This belief is one of the fundamental presumptions of our culture, and the idea of being a separate self is founded upon the belief in the existence of time, and that I, the separate self, appeared at one moment of time. I'm moving along, and then I'm going to disappear out of it. But time is going to continue without me. That is it's a belief. It's a fallacy. Time is made out of thought. It's not there. It doesn't really exist. Do you experience time in deep sleep? Don't you have the experience that the moment you fall asleep and the moment you wake up is the same moment? from the point of view of the waking state. In other words, from the point of view of the mind, that you have the waking state, then the dreaming state,
Sure.
mind is present. And at the moment mind disappears, at the end of the dream, and the moment the next dream appears, from the point of view of the mind, there's no time there. On waking up, the mind says 4 hours existed. But our experience is that there was no time. Why was there no time? Because there was no mind. Time equals mind. Life is not going to go on after death. That there is no afterlife after death. All those ideas are concessions to the belief that time is real. The whole idea of previous lives, past lives, and life after death is a fairy story that is made up as a concession to the belief that there is time. Life is not everlasting. Nothing lasts in time. There is no time present for things to last in. There is this now, which is the only now there ever is. It's out of time, eternal. It's not moving along like this. This now is the only now there ever it is. And it's not a moment in time. It's not going anywhere. It hasn't come anywhere. And the appearance or disappearance of thoughts, feelings, sensations and perceptions makes absolutely no difference to it whatsoever. So the fear, the sadness is only for an illusory self that believes that time is going to go on without it. The point is not to never have to come back again. But that would only be the case if this were some kind of hell realm. The point is to be happy, to be fulfilled, to be at peace. And if you're at peace, then whether you dissipate and go fully back to God's being, or whether you assume a new form, doesn't really matter, because the new form will be informed by the peace you feel in this life. So either way, why would you matter? Why would you mind?
So if it was peace, let's say, formed again in peace, that would be okay. But let's say it was fear, formed again in fear. So I fall asleep, I dream nightmares because I'm afraid in my daily life, something like that. So wouldn't that, relatively speaking, mean that it was a kind of hell that I'm stuck in?
That is a good reason for seeking peace in this lifetime. However, you don't seek peace in this lifetime because you want to be peaceful in your next life.
No,
you seek
right.
peace in this lifetime because you want to be peaceful now, and the side effect of your present peace will be that if you reincarnate down the line, the peace that you feel now will go into the make of your new incarnation. That is, if this model is
If this
correct.
model, okay. I mean, that's the reason I started by saying that I know abiding in this moment
in
is
other words,
the point.
Discover peace now, and whatever happens to you after death will be taken care of. What I'm trying to say is the very best preparation for death, whatever happens at death, is to find peace now. So for your children in this lifetime, for your children in the next lifetime, for yourself in this lifetime, for yourself in the next lifetime, the only thing to do is to find peace and fulfillment now.
Oh.
That is the best preparation for you and for your children and for your friends and for the people you don't know. In other words, for everyone. It is the best contribution you can make to humanity, whether you know them or not, is to recognize your true nature and its inherent peace.
My question is about, I should say what I'm here for. I think it's what we're all here for, but what I'm here for is to embody that awakened, knowing of myself as consciousness or love. So I've been graced with those experiences in the past that were fleeting and life-changing, but my goal, of course, is to bring that into everyday life on an ongoing basis. With that in mind, I'm curious to know if you think that what could be called natural resistance to death or fear of death, which is sort of a basic instinct in all animals, including human animals, does that change as we evolve in consciousness or as we deepen into that knowing? And B, as we sit here before that shift has taken place or that deepening, is there any value in exploring or trying to address that?
Yes, our resistance to death changes. Our fear of death comes from the deep feeling we have that the self that we are is generated by the body, shares the limits of the body, and suffers the destiny of the body. It's like believing that the space of this room appeared when the building was built, and that when the building is taken down, the space will disappear with it. That's most people's view of themselves. The self is like the space in this room. It will disappear when the room, in this case the body, dies. So when it is clear to us that there is no personal individual self, then the fear of that personal individual self dying with the body disappears.
But if you're in the middle of an intersection where you can't, say, move, you're immobilized by some crazy paralysis, and a car is about to mow you down, is not your experience bodily driven?
Of course, I would try to jump out of the way. That's a natural conditioning of the body
for sure.
To preserve itself. It's the same conditioning that makes us eat when we're hungry or drink when we're thirsty. It's just a conditioning of the body. And what I'm suggesting doesn't imply that we would no longer take care of the body, that we would no longer move out of the way of a car.
Is there anything that we can or should perhaps explore in working with that fear?
Yes, yourself. Explore the nature of yourself. That will take care of the fear of disappearing. That's all you need to do.
Perfect. Okay.
What is going to happen to your fear of death when you discover that the self that you are is not going to die, is not limited by or dependent on or generated by, doesn't suffer the destiny of the body? In other words, you haven't worked on your fear. The answer to your question, should I work on my fear of death? No, don't. All that is necessary is to investigate yourself. If you see clearly who you are, that will take care of the fear of death. The fear of death will leave you without your ever having worked on it.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
I should just add one thing. You were talking about the death of oneself. But what goes for ourselves obviously goes for others. So it's also interesting to consider how we face the death of someone else. And just because we have this deep conviction inside that what we ultimately are doesn't die, doesn't mean that we don't respond in a more relative way when we're faced with death. I've been faced with death twice in the recent future. One this morning, my aunt died. And one, as some of you know, I'd been in California, or was supposed to have been in California for a couple of months, but I had to go home soon after I arrived because my son's best friend died. So My son is 19, his best friend, who was like a brother to him, died. He was 20 years old. And of course, my son, all his friends, and his best friend, Rory's parents, were all devastated. We were all, everyone was devastated. I was devastated by it. I was deeply saddened by it. But this didn't contradict my deep knowledge that who Rory essentially was, or who Rory essentially is at peace. And actually I had a dream a few days later which confirmed it for me. He came to me in a dream, radiant and smiling, and I asked him how his memorial service was. He said it was so beautiful and so peaceful, and with a broad, beautiful smile on his face. This was the confirmation for me that what he is at peace. But it didn't stop me at a more relative level feeling profound sadness for his parents, and for my son, and for his friends, and for myself. He was a boy that was in and out of our home all the time. He used to come on holiday with us, so I felt it very deeply. I didn't just laugh and say, there is no death. I felt it it was extremely poignant. It was sad, and so I went home and I spent time with the parents and friends. However, this morning, my aunt died, and I got a message just before satsang this morning, but I noticed that there was no sadness at all. It's not that I loved my aunt less than I loved Matt's best friend, Rory, but she was 92 or 93. She was in pain, discomfort. There was no sadness. There's no sadness in me at all. I just think, oh, I'm so glad for her. So this deep knowledge that there is no death doesn't make it impossible for us to feel at a more relative level a whole range of emotions in relation to death.
Thank you. I really appreciate the additional comments.
So what would be the best preparation for death? It would be the best preparation for sleep. And what would be the best preparation for sleep? To abide in yourself, knowingly. To be knowingly yourself. That would be the best preparation for whatever you are to experience after the dissolution of the body. Just as it is the best preparation for falling asleep, for whatever dream you are going to have, or indeed the best preparation for whatever experience we are to experience in the waking state, the best preparation for whatever might happen to each of us tomorrow would be to be knowingly this presence. That would be the best preparation for whatever is going to occur to each of us tomorrow or next week or next year, however wonderful or awful it may be.